Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Meeting House, where once again we're going to have a conversation on religion and American life. I am your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody. I'm glad you've joined us, and I'm glad once again in the Meeting House to continue our conversation, Dr. George Bullard. He is a veteran pastor, author, consultant, administrator, mission strategist, and best of all, I like his own self-description, a broker of information, knowledge, and wisdom. Welcome into the Meeting House, George.
It's great to be here, Dwight. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
We've had a great conversation focused on Southern Baptists, but now I want to broaden our lens, so to speak, and take a wide-angle look. You have been a consultant with more than 50 denominations and more than 1,000 churches. You know what's going on in a great swath of American Christianity. Where are we headed? We've been on the downgrade, to use an old controversial term, on the downgrade. Is it going to continue?
It's going to continue. Denominations generally are engaging in an ensmallment campaign, not an enlargement campaign. And they are drawing closer in to one another. Most denominations that I have the opportunity to encounter are what I call an overly churched culture denomination. Right. Mm-hmm. They know how to talk to people who know the secret handshake and the language of Zion in their particular tribe's tradition, but they don't really understand the personhood, the life issues of the pre-Christian, the unchurched, the underchurched, and the dechurched.
This is why Tim Keller, the late Tim Keller in D.C., why his death has drawn so much attention, because he had such success in doing exactly what you just said. Am I right about this?
I think we are right about that. Tim represented one of the multiple waves of new starts that have happened in megalopolitan areas like New York City, the metropolitan area.
Redeemer Presbyterian Church, right in the center of the big city.
Absolutely. It was a timing thing that was wonderful. Not that there haven't been others who have done same or similar kinds of things. He had the ability, the wisdom, and the personhood to be able to draw people around him that heard his words, and to do it with a sense of integrity, and not about building himself up, but about building the kingdom up.
He was a very winsome person.
Absolutely.
Not every religious leader is a winsome person.
That is correct.
Some religious leaders are irritating.
They are.
Before they open their mouth, you could say, oh, he irritates me. But Tim Keller was a very winsome person. People like this.
Yes, it is. It's very true. Yeah.
Even though he represented this reformed part of this stern, straight-laced Reformed theology and Reformed church life. You wouldn't pick that up too much just by talking with him. He had a very winsome. How is this going to play out? Are there enough Tim Kellers out there to keep the gospel percolating in the United States?
Well, there's certainly enough personalities in the vein of a Tim Keller to be able to keep things percolating, shall we say, as you've said. Our issue is, good enough is not always good enough. We don't necessarily have a strategy that's with the arms big enough in terms of helping things happen. And we are going through a season of time in many denominations where the locus of strategy is being pulled to a centralized place. One of the questions that I always ask denominational entities is the question, where is the voice of the Holy Spirit clearest? In an administrative office in ABC City, or on the grassroots where XYZ people are working hard to be examples of the good news of Jesus Christ? And of course, my answer always is it's a grassroots issue. So how do you organize and mobilize the grassroots to move outside of their cultural captivity in their churches, to have dialogue with and seek to understand the next generations.
Where is this being done? You're in touch with lots of networks and lots of processes.
It can, I would want to state it this way, it can really only be done primarily through the planting of new congregations who begin with how are we going to touch the pre-Christian and the unchurched and the de-churched people, and seek to begin by understanding them. Because churches seem to be effective in reaching people who are far from God for somewhere between 14 and 18 years. And we know this by research. And then they go over the top, and they're no longer as effective as they once were.
Now, wait a minute. Say this again. You're talking about churches having effective outreach for, you said, 14 to 18 years?
In terms of reaching non-believers, those who are far from God, their percentage of new Christians after that
begins to decline. And they begin more of an in-house ministry and in-house evangelism.
Yeah, I do. If I could speak a little consultantese for just a minute, I'll try to be simple and short.
I'll let you.
Okay.
Have at it.
I sometimes will get a church, and I recently did a pretty large church. I mean, they have around 1,300 in attendance on Sunday in 2 or 3 services.
That's much larger than the average.
Much larger than the average. We did an analysis of the new people who had connected with their church in the last 5 years. And we used the old church growth categories, sort of. You know, we said, did these people transfer their membership from another church? And if it was in one of the traditions where they didn't baptize by immersion, did you require, immersion baptism? Or were they children who came of age in the life of the church that we ought to be cultivating, that ought to be a no-brainer, towards the faith? Or, and this is the special one, were they a spouse in a household where one of the spouses was already a Christian? Now, I say take those, the transfers, the children, and the spouses, and put them over here. And tell me what you have left. Who are the people from non-Christian households who are coming to faith in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, who are being baptized into the membership of your church? All right, I've used that analysis over decades. Some of the churches that scream the loudest, they're evangelistic. Between 9 and 12% of their new members are evangelism results.
Coming from the outside.
Coming from the outside. This large church I recently did, their number is 2.5%. And yet, as I said to the pastor, I turned to the pastor and I said, well, what this means is if you get invited to speak at the evangelism conference, integrity would say you decline. Now, if you get invited to speak at the church growth conference, that's good. Mm-hmm. But there's a difference.
There is a difference.
So the core issue is the church is not encountering the spiritual seekers in such a way that the genuine message of Jesus Christ connects.
You have focused evangelism on the unchurched, the unbaptized, the unevangelized, but we have a growing population in the United States of the de-churched. People who are leaving in disgust or because they can't connect the dots. Their religious life doesn't connect with their Monday through Saturday life. This enormous population now, hundreds of thousands of them, Southern Baptists that have deconnected from church life. Is this going to be a target population for evangelism over the next 20 years?
Well, I want to say 2 things about that, and one of them is very personal.
Okay.
I have an extended family member who has said to me recently, who grew up in the church, but has been in a couple of churches in his adult life that had conflict and treated ministers badly.
Mm-hmm. Everybody could tell a story like that.
That's right. Everybody can tell a story. And he says, I'm spiritual, I read my Bible, but I don't like church. And I don't like what church does to people.
I mean, that is the banner
Yeah.
that many, many people are waving these days.
Right.
I love Jesus. I pray. I don't like church.
Right. The second one is, I don't know if you follow Ryan Berg at all.
Very much so.
Yeah, well,
he's been in the meeting house more than once.
Okay, well, good. Well, one of his latest is that the nuns have flattened out a little bit over the pandemic and stuff. And so maybe it's not growing as much, and maybe we have a new opportunity. And by the way, the term I'm using now since the pandemic is we don't really count membership and attendance anymore. We count the people engaged.
This is so interesting because I pastor a micro church. We had 26 in church on Pentecost Sunday.
Well, you and Ryan Berg are the.
We are.
He's only having though in the teens though.
I know. He and I have talked about this.
Right.
And we had a big meeting, a big for us, of our people, because about half of the people who attend are not members. And there was a considerable pushback from these attenders from becoming members or even wanting to be a member. And we started in the conversation using this word, how are you engaged with the church? And I've just been wondering, are there models of engagement out there that can replace the membership model with an engagement model of congregational life? You would know this.
There's a lot of dialogue about it. I don't know that anybody has put together something that is reliable and ongoing yet to count engagement. But one of the things I did during the pandemic with churches I was working with was, they said, we were having 275 in attendance, now we're only having 190. And I said, well, but let's talk about how many different people are engaged. And when they did the engagement number, it was over 350.
Right.
And that included the 275 that used to be there too.
Well, I've been telling my congregation there are 4 quadrants, 4 concentric circles, those that show up in the sanctuary. These are the ones that we count.
Right.
Those that have joined our live stream, everybody's live streaming.
Right.
And we have people in 6 or 7 states that join us. The people that only read our newsletter, about half of the people that read our newsletter are disengaged from any other aspect of our church. And then we have a social ministry of food and clothing in which we generally have more people attending our Sunday meal for something to eat than we do coming into the sanctuary. So all 4 of these are engaged in some way, connected. Here's what I want to ask. Some of the more recent renewals, broad-based renewals of Christian life in America, have come from surprising places. They haven't come from existing congregations or from existing headquarters of denominations. We remember the Pentecostal movement started in a storefront out there in Los Angeles in April of 1906. The whole Pentecostal movement. And then when you and I were young teenagers, we began hearing about the Jesus movement out on the West Coast. And who was it that carried the cross all over America? What was his name?
Yeah, I know who I can see in this picture. I can't call the name.
Arthur Blessed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, brought that kind of hippie beachfront spirit with him all across. Is a renewal or a revival of American religion likely to come out of a surprising place?
It is likely to come out of a surprising place, and it is likely that we need one a minimum of every 7 years. I'm a big proponent of the pattern of Leviticus 25, 1 through 13. That every 7 years in those sabbatical years, we need to look carefully and clearly for the new thing that God is doing and to see how it needs to be a part of where we are. And every 50 years, we need to start over in terms of our understanding of the church and the strategies for local and global engagement.
I can't believe you're quoting Leviticus. because of this. I'm going to tell you this little story.
All right.
Every Sunday after church, more than half of our congregation goes out to eat together.
Uh-huh.
It's become a really critical core practice in our church. We went to a place that was a restaurant for a large hotel. When I drove up, every parking place was taken. I thought, oh my gosh, we're not going to get anything to eat. I go in, people are milling about in suits and ties, and I surmise somebody's had a worship service here.
Right.
I stop and ask somebody. He said, yes. I said, can you take me to your pastor? Now, he didn't know that I was a minister also. He took me to their pastor, and this is what he told me. He said, there are 4 congregations, one from Greenville, one from Anderson, one from Charlotte, and one from, I think he said, Silva, over in the mountains, meeting here because this is one of our high holy days. I said, what do you mean? You mean Pentecost? He said, well, we have 7 holy days a year because the book of Leviticus, and he started talking about all of these patterns, the Jewish, the Hebrew festivals, in the book of Leviticus. They are a Sabbath, seventh-day worshiping network, and they keep. So I had that conversation on Sunday, and I vowed to myself, I've got to go home and reread the book of Leviticus.
Yes.
And here you are, evoking Leviticus again, the 7-day sabbatical and the 50-day year of Jubilee.
That's right. And what happens is that the church starts with a vision and thinks it's always going to be that way.
But we need a new vision every 7 years.
Every 7 years we need to be asking God to tweak our vision and to speak into us if there's a new sense or focus of direction or take us to the next dimension or level of what we're trying to do, not to fulfill the founding vision.
And what happens every 50 years? It's in the book of Leviticus and elsewhere, it's the year of Jubilees. Slaves are freed, the land lies fallow, everything changes.
I have just, in my retirement, where I'm still doing ministry in retirement, I have just finished a consultation with a congregation that is in their 50th year of worship. And I recommended exactly that to them.
For that congregation to have a year of Jubilees in their congregation.
Right.
What a brilliant idea, George.
Yeah. Well, the issue is they were started in an empty nest to senior adult community. And that community has become a different kind of community now, and they're still acting like it was an empty nest to senior adult community.
Did they hear you well? Did they respond well?
We'll see. We're going to talk again.
Because you know in your study of the Hebrew Scriptures that even though Leviticus lays out the year of Jubilees with a lot of detail, we're not sure whether the people actually did it every 50 years. Am I not right about this?
Well, there is no sign that they continually did it every 50 years, but that was indeed the instructions. But whether or not they followed it. But my ministry in the last 54 years has been a lot around what's called the congregational life cycle. And I finally figured out about 5 or 6 years ago, wait a minute, the key to my own life cycle is the pattern. Now, it's not a theological statement about Leviticus 25. It is the pattern of Leviticus 25. And that's how the life cycle has really worked. And so therefore, if a church goes on too long without asking God to help them see afresh their vision, then it starts diminishing. And it becomes overly church culture. And it loses sight of the people who are spiritually seeking who need them most.
You're suggesting that the real renaissance or renewal of the church is going to come from innovators, maybe people on the margins, surprising the established church with what's going on.
Do you know the birth story of John Wimber and the Vineyard Church, how that happened?
I know something. Tell me about it.
Well, I'm going from a program on television from 35 years ago, which was an interview with John Wimber.
Okay.
And so this was in his own words. He was a backup instrumentalist for Simon and Garfunkel.
John Wimber was.
Yes. Alcohol and drugs.
That is a new piece of information.
Alcohol and drugs were a part of his life. One night in a hotel room when he was terribly drunk, overdosed, almost not overdosed, but heavily dosed, he pulled out the proverbial Gideon Bible. He started reading, said, I got to have Jesus. When he got home from his tour, he started going to a church that was about 3 blocks away from him. And he had attended for 2 or 3 weeks. And as he left, he stopped an usher and he said, when do we do the stuff? He said, the stuff? What do you mean the stuff? Yeah. Heal the sick, restore sight to the blind, feed the hungry. It's stuff I read in the Bible. And the guy said, we don't do those things anymore. Now we believe in them. And he said he took the guy by his lapels and shook him and said, you don't understand. I gave up alcohol and drugs for this. I'm going to do the stuff. And so he went out and started the Vineyard Churches.
Have you seen the movie The Jesus Revolution? That's what this is about.
Okay.
The movie is about this.
All right, I haven't.
Well, this is, of course, happening out there when we were teenagers.
Right.
67, 68, 69,
Right.
and college students.
Sure.
Coming from the edge of it. The movie, of course, is about what happened out
Right.
there. And it's about the transformation of a pastor, played by Kelsey Frazier.
Frazier, okay, yeah.
The story is about the transformation first of a pastor and then the congregation as all of these Jesus-loving hippies moved in with their music and long beards and their pot.
Yes. Yes.
It is a great movie
Yeah.
about how the people on the fringe
Right.
brought into the established church a transformation.
Well, part of what I'm trying to say through all of this is it's not what organizations, denominational organizations, or even parachurch organizations can strategize for and fund and promote. It is people who feel in the grassroots the movement of God's Spirit, and it wells up and expands from there. So therefore, we have to be constantly looking for those kinds of opportunities and figure out how to fuel them.
How to support them.
How to support them, how not to take them over.
As some people would say, to find out where God is at work and go there.
Well, no, that's not in my theology either. I think that God is at work everywhere, I believe.
Well, you're right about that.
But it is where people maybe have responded to the work of God and something miraculous is happening. The Acts 2 church was a church of the miraculous.
Okay, George, I'm going to ask you one last question. I was driving up from Georgia last week and found a radio preacher talking about the change in alcohol policy in the evangelical world. Mm-hmm. And he quoted, first of all, the Moody Bible Institute of Chicago, how they changed their policy and lifted the prohibition against alcohol. And then they quoted, referred to the Dallas Theological Seminary, another staunch right-wing evangelical school. They did the same thing. And example number 3 from Greenville, South Carolina, Hymns and Hops. You know about this?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I don't really know about it.
I'm going to tell you about it, and then we're going to end with this, because Hymns and Hops started here, where people get together at a brewery and sing old gospel songs and drink beer.
Yeah. I've also, Theology on Tap is another.
Theology has been going on a long time. Yeah. And what started here with 80 people, this preacher said, has now expanded to 6 states. Well, about 2 months ago, I went to the one. They have it down here in Taylor's, just not very far from this studio. I went. There were hundreds of people there. I thought they would be singing contemporary music. old songs, Power in the Blood, There is a Fountain, and people drinking beer and singing these old songs. I don't know whether that's a source of renewal in the church or not, but it would sure shake up a lot of those Southern Baptist brothers, wouldn't it?
Well, Jesus did go to the wedding in Cana.
He did. And he changed the water into wine and not the other way around.
Right.
And that is. George, thank you for being in the meeting house with me today.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Blessings on your work, and let's do this again.
Sounds good.
You've been in the meeting house where we have a conversation on religion and American life. I'm your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody. My guest today, part 2 of our conversation, Dr. George Bullard. We're talking about denominationalism, the state of religion of Christianity in America, and what its future might be. Visit our website at themeetinghouse.net. Write me, send me a note, especially if there's somebody you think I should interview. God bless you all. Have a good day.